In the heart of Canada's immigration saga lies a story of ambition, betrayal, and systemic failure, with the Liberal Party of Canada at the epicenter of a storm that has reshaped the nation's borders and eroded public trust. The Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, IRPA, enacted in 2001, was meant to be a beacon of fairness, balancing humanitarian ideals with national security. Yet, over 2 decades under successive Liberal governments, this framework has been twisted by corruption, mismanagement, and political opportunism, leading to a crisis where foreign nationals face a labyrinth of broken promises and Canada's sovereignty is under strain. This thrilling deep dive unravels the step-by-step descent into chaos, spotlighting the Liberal Party's role in undermining Canada's immigration system, culminating in the stark reality affirmed by the Saskatchewan Court of King's Bench in July 2025, foreign nationals have no inherent right to immigrate to Canada. Buckle up as we dive into the savage details of how Liberal corruption fueled this mess, leaving a trail of policy failures, exploited loopholes, and betrayed public trust. The Liberal Party, under Justin Trudeau's leadership, swept into power in 2015, with a vision of Canada as a global beacon of inclusivity. Promising to welcome immigrants to fuel economic growth, the Liberals painted a rosy picture of immigration as the key to prosperity. They ramped up permanent resident targets, aiming for 300,000 annually by 2017, a significant jump from the previous Conservative government's more modest goals. The IRPA, designed to regulate immigration with clear criteria for economic, family, and humanitarian streams, became a tool for political optics. The Liberals leaned heavily on the narrative of Canada as a sanctuary, particularly after high-profile moves like accepting 25,000 Syrian refugees in 2015 to 2016. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. The Liberals' ambition to boost immigration numbers was less about humanitarianism and more about propping up a housing market teetering on speculative bubbles and ensuring cheap labor for corporate interests. By prioritizing quantity over quality, they ignored the IRPA's safeguards, such as rigorous admissibility checks, setting the stage for systemic overload. The Liberals' open-door rhetoric had unintended consequences, particularly at the Canada-U.S. border. The IRPA's provisions for refugee protection, aligned with the 1951 UN Refugee Convention, were designed to offer sanctuary to those fleeing persecution. However, the Liberals' failure to enforce border controls led to a surge in irregular border crossings, particularly after 2017, when thousands crossed from the U.S. into Canada, exploiting the Safe Third Country Agreement's loophole that allowed asylum claims if entrants avoided official ports of entry. By 2022, asylum claims hit a record 91,710, overwhelming the Immigration and Refugee Board, IRB, and creating backlogs that stretched up to 2 years. The Liberals' inaction wasn't just negligence, it was a calculated move to appease progressive voters while ignoring the IRPA's clear mandate for orderly processing. Corruption crept in as political pressure led to lax enforcement, with Canada Border Services Agency, CBSA, officers often instructed to prioritize speed over scrutiny. The result? A system where genuine refugees waited in limbo while others exploited loopholes, clogging the IRB and draining resources. This mismanagement violated the IRPA's intent to ensure fair and timely decisions, setting a dangerous precedent for what was to come. As the asylum system buckled, the Liberals doubled down on temporary resident programs, particularly for international students and temporary foreign workers. The 2023 to 2025 immigration levels plan initially set ambitious targets of 500,000 permanent residents annually, but the real scandal was the unchecked influx of temporary residents, which ballooned to 6.2% of Canada's population by 2023. This wasn't an accident, it was a deliberate strategy to fuel economic growth at the expense of sustainability. Liberal insiders, cozy with corporate lobbies, pushed for lax oversight of study and work permits, turning Canada's immigration system into a cash cow for universities and businesses. Diploma mills and shady employers exploited the system, issuing permits to unqualified applicants while the Liberals turned a blind eye. The IRPA's provisions for temporary residents, meant to ensure compliance with conditions like leaving Canada post-permit, were ignored, leading to widespread visa overstays. By 2024, the CBSA reported deporting 8,500 individuals annually, a drop in the bucket compared to the estimated hundreds of thousands who remained illegally. This betrayal of the IRPA's principles, prioritizing national interest and public safety, was a direct result of liberal corruption, as they colluded with corporate interests to keep the system lax for profit. Perhaps the most egregious example of liberal corruption lies in the revelation that, over 11 years, Canada forgave over 17,500 criminal convictions for foreign nationals to facilitate their entry or stay. Under the IRPA, foreign nationals with criminal records are generally inadmissible, but the Liberals' discretionary rehabilitation process, overseen by Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, IRCC, allowed thousands to bypass this rule. While rehabilitation can be a compassionate act, the lack of transparency and minimal public data on the crimes forgiven or decision-making criteria sparked outrage. Critics argue this was a politically motivated move to maintain high immigration numbers, regardless of public safety risks. The process, shrouded in secrecy, fueled perceptions of corruption, as Liberal-appointed officials wielded unchecked power to grant second chances without accountability. The IRPA's strict admissibility rules were undermined by this opaque system, reflecting the Liberals' prioritization of optics over integrity. By 2025, the Liberals' House of Cards began to collapse under public and political pressure. The Strong Borders Act, introduced in June 2025, was a belated attempt to address the chaos, amending the IRPA to tighten asylum claim rules, enhance border security, and streamline information sharing. Measures like restricting asylum claims made over a year after arrival and ending flagpoling aimed to curb abuses, but they came too late. The Act's harsher provisions, such as mass cancellations of immigration documents, were a reaction to the Liberals' earlier failures, but they couldn't undo years of systemic mismanagement that had strained housing, healthcare, and public services. The Saskatchewan Court of King's Bench ruling in July 2025 was a bombshell, bluntly stating that foreign nationals do not have a right to immigrate to Canada, or a privileged process. This decision, tied to the case of an Indian lab technician whose permit was revoked due to suspected irregularities, exposed the Liberals' failure to uphold the IRPA's rigorous standards. The court highlighted how fraudulent applications had slipped through, a direct result of the Liberals' lax oversight and prioritization of volume over quality. This ruling was a wake-up call, forcing a reckoning with the consequences of corruption-driven policies that allowed unqualified applicants to exploit the system. The Liberal Party's corruption lies in its deliberate erosion of the IRPA's safeguards for political and economic gain. By prioritizing high immigration numbers to boost GDP and appease corporate and progressive interests, they overwhelmed the IRB, ignored visa overstays, and forgave thousands of criminal convictions with little transparency. This wasn't just incompetence, it was a betrayal of public trust, as the Liberals sacrificed the system's integrity for short-term wins. The housing crisis, strained public services, and rising anti-immigrant sentiment are the fallout of their reckless policies. The 2025 to 2027 immigration levels plans reduction to 395,000 permanent residents, and a 5% temporary resident cap is a belated attempt to clean up their mess, but the damage is done. The Saskatchewan ruling is a stark reminder that Canada's borders are not a free-for-all, and the Liberal legacy of corruption will take years to repair. Power's sexy, deception's deadly, and politics always messy. High stakes, higher lies, and corruption. Power isn't taken, it's bought. Politics has never been so dirty, and baby, we're just getting started. Until the next scandal, XOXO.